Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers lose to the Buffalo Sabres at Madison Square Garden in what was their last home game of the 2025-2026 season, and a fitting end to it with them losing. They were obviously very bad at home this year. Their final record at Madison Square Garden is 14-20-7. They did have a nice, final 7-game homestand here where they do go 5-2. Came very close to going 6-1. They were leading this game 3-2 against the Sabres after 2 periods, and that was actually the first Ranger regulation loss when leading after 2 periods. So the Rangers going into this game were 18-0-4, now 18-1-4, which actually, based on points percentage, is actually not very good. All said, that's kind of a bottom 6 or 7 win percentage when leading after 2, but still notable that, in game 79, they didn't really the bigger thing there is that they didn't lead that many games. They, going into this game, only 22 times did they lead after 2, this being game 23, and for the first time they lose in regulation. Kind of an unbelievable stat that kind of ties both the Rangers and Sabres together is the Rangers record. Now, they weren't leading after 1, the Sabres were. The 2 top teams in the NHL in terms of win percentage when leading after the first period, the Sabres at 25-2. So that does improve for Buffalo, and almost, and if Buffalo hadn't won, the Rangers might have been the one that overtook them. The Rangers are actually 21-1 when leading after 1 period, which is pretty insane. Again, they weren't leading in this one. Buffalo, takes the early 2-0 lead. Rangers score a late power play goal in the first, and the Rangers kind of turn the tide. But, ultimately Buffalo, who is in a fight for the Atlantic Division, #1 seed, and there's a lot on the line for them. Even the #1 spot in the Eastern Conference is up for grabs. Right now, Carolina occupies that spot. But, Buffalo, Tampa, Montreal, they came into this game in a 3-way tie for first. Same games, same points. So while maybe you're not getting the desperation of a team that is fighting for a playoff spot, ultimately there was still a lot on the line. And what you've seen lately is the Rangers have played teams that have had a lot to play for, but they weren't that good. And so what you've seen on this 7-game homestand is the 2 losses were to Montreal and Buffalo. Now, they could have won both of those games, but that seems to, I talk about all these different things, but what is winning out right now is simply, more talented teams, better teams, taking aside, the motivation and what's on the line. It obviously helps when you have a little something, that you're playing for, and certainly Buffalo does. So, they're going to be headed to the playoffs for the first time in 14 years, 14 straight seasons of not making the playoffs. The last time they were in was 2011. And, the Rangers, this was a very big loss for them as far as draft concerns. And so let's just first talk about that, because really this was getting to a point where if they won this game, you were starting to hit a territory where, finishing 3rd or even 4th, which is where it's been most likely to go and is still that way. Who knows? The Seattle Kraken are in full free fall, and teams like the Panthers and Maple Leafs have been losing a lot, and the Rangers play the Panthers head on for one of their final 3 games, the Rangers, that is. So it's still mathematically possible for the Rangers to drop to as low as 2. The Rangers have 5 more points than the Blackhawks. The Blackhawks have 1 game in hand. It's very unlikely. If it makes sense, if the Blackhawks are playing a non-relevant team, of course you want the Blackhawks to win. But I think realistically speaking, that's, with the Rangers winning all the games they won, that's kind of not likely. What is still possible is really the best they could finish would be 3rd. And right now that's where Calgary is, and Calgary has 2 less points than the Rangers, but 2 games in hand, and currently with the tiebreaker. So that is certainly, possible for Calgary to leapfrog the Rangers. But again, there's also Seattle, Toronto, and Florida. I kind of cut it off there. I don't think that when it comes to teams like, let's just say, St. Louis, like the Rangers are 3 points behind St. Louis, and St. Louis has 2 games in hand with the tiebreaker. I'm gonna go ahead and say, like, look, obviously, the better St. Louis does, that's great, but I think that you're looking at anywhere from, I would say, 3 to 7. I think 3 to 7, and the teams of real importance are Calgary, Seattle, and then Toronto and Florida. With Chicago and St. Louis being on kind of both sides of the extremes is kind of the way I'm looking at this with 3 games to go. And about a week to go in the NHL regular season. So for this last game at Madison Square Garden, the Rangers go with Igor Shesterkin in net, which was expected. As far as the goalie plan the rest of the way, I think with 3 games to go, you're going to see Igor in at least 2 of them, maybe 3, and Jonathan Quick. If there was to be one where Igor doesn't play, it would be Quick. I don't think we're going to see Dylan Garand again, as much as I wouldn't mind having him get another start. I think that if Quick were to play, maybe that last game against Tampa, and but maybe Quick has already played his last game, that home start against Detroit. We don't know yet, but I guess if I had to make an assumption, figure Igor gets the next game at Dallas, which we'll discuss after the Sabre game. In net for the Sabres was UPL Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who's played very well for them and is probably going to get the lion's share of opportunity in the playoffs for the Sabres. Alex Lyon is the backup. I think he's a little bit banged up right now, but Luukkonen has been better anyway. And for the Rangers, it's the same forward lines, combinations, and defensive pairs. It's kind of been that way for last feels like 3 or 4 games. So, we'll see coming off a loss if there's any changes, but I would expect if health is there, I would expect to see things the same. So I thought the Rangers actually played it was a rare high event first period. And kind of the ironic thing is that the Rangers, the last period, the Rangers only got 1 shot on goal, which in some ways is very fitting. But that really mostly happened in the first, where they had their really low shot counts in the low event periods was the first period. Here, it was actually the opposite. There was a lot going on. 12 shots to 11 Rangers in the first, and I feel like even the shot counts don't even do it justice. There was not a whole lot of defense and just a lot of grade A scoring chances. And I thought that the Rangers really didn't necessarily deserve to be down 2-0, but Buffalo was very dynamic and dangerous in the Rangers zone. But Buffalo was making a lot of turnovers. Rangers had a lot of prime chances right up close and just weren't able to score. Special teams was heavily in favor of the Rangers in this game, where they go 2 for 3 on the power play. Buffalo goes 0 for 4. So that's why for this one, when you look at the plus minus, a lot of minuses to the Rangers because of, Buffalo kind of getting the better of them even strength wise when it comes to goals. But at 4:40, Ryan McLeod scores his 13th goal of the season, assisted by Zucker and Timmins. Sabres get on the board first. And, I feel like this was not the best game from Gabe Perreault, at least from a defensive side of things. I feel like, a couple of lost coverages on Perreault's part. And this was a transition goal by Buffalo where just a lot of speed by McLeod. And, Drew Fortescue is kind of, in his first action. This is a tough matchup against Buffalo. You go from college to the pros and you're playing one of the hottest teams and dangerous teams in the Sabres. It's not going to be easy. And, he had some good moments and not so good moments. But also, I think this is one that Igor would want to have back. McLeod had speed down the right side, but I think Shesterkin could have certainly made the save. It kind of goes under his right armpit and in for the goal to make it 1-0 Buffalo. And then they score again. They make it 2-0. Zach Benson scores his 11th goal of the season, assisted by Dahlin and Byram. And so it's a 2-goal lead for the Sabres. Again, you have Fortescue and Schneider on for this one. And, just a play where Buffalo has a lot of momentum. Rangers are hemmed in their zone. Line change going on. So you have a mix of, it's really Zibanejad on with Trocheck's wingers, Brodzinski and Cooley. And it ends up being a shot from the point by Dahlin. And Benson is able to get positioning on Fortescue in front. And so it goes off of Benson and past Shesterkin for the goal to give the Sabres a 2-0 lead. But again, it didn't have that feel. It didn't have a Sabre 2-0 feel to it. The Rangers certainly were very much in it. And later in the period, they get a power play. Adam Sikora, working hard, was tripped by Ryan McLeod at 18:24. And the Rangers, before the period ended at 19:21, score a power play goal, and it's Alexis Lafrenière, who has really, it's almost that new Chris Kreider role where he is getting so many tip-in goals in front. This is his 23rd goal of the season, assisted by Fox and Miller. And when it comes to Adam Fox, that extended his point streak to 8 games. He wasn't done there. He would do more. But when this game was all said and done, 15 points in 8 games for Adam Fox, 4 goals, 11 assists. He has been on quite the tear. But Alexis Lafrenière has done very well for the last month plus. And Adam Fox deserves a lot of credit for keeping the puck in. He is so good at the blue line. And then it's just, quick passing. And Fox with the shot from up top, and Lafrenière gets a stick on it for the goal. So they cut it to 2-1 going in the second period. And the Rangers really did a nice job of, carrying that into the second. However, 23 seconds in, Adam Fox does trip Tage Thompson. And so the Sabres do go on the power play, but don't score. They really didn't. I mean, apparently it didn't even, I guess that one might have had some good opportunities, but by and large, the Rangers were very aggressive on the penalty kill, and Buffalo didn't have a whole lot of opportunities for how good their personnel is. So the score remains 2-1. And then soon after that power play is over, Alexis Lafrenière scores again. His second goal of the game, 24th goal of the season, assisted by Drew Fortescue. Actually, very nice pass by Fortescue, where he is able to get the puck and quickly finds Lafrenière, who beats, all the Sabres defenders, goes in all alone on Luukkonen and takes a snapshot and scores to tie it up. So for Lafrenière, he's getting close in terms of the career highs. He is 2 points away from tying his season high point total from a couple years ago. So he's got 3 games. If he gets 2 points, he ties it. If he gets 3 points, he breaks it. So that'll be something to keep an eye on for Alexis Lafrenière. So we're all tied at 2. And then Buffalo goes back to the box later on. And again, I felt like the Rangers, once they tied it, they were in pretty good control. I felt like the Rangers really for, the second period, I felt like the Rangers did a really nice job. And at 14-14, Peyton Krebs hooks Ty Cartier in what would be the first of 2 penalties drawn by Cartier. And the Rangers go back on the power play and score again. And this time it's Adam Fox. His 9th goal of the season, assisted by Trocheck and Zibanejad. So, and a nice screen in front by Lafrenière. Not sure if Luukkonen saw it, but again, Adam Fox has, really, really been scorching hot lately. And that goal gives Rangers a 3-2 lead. Then the Sabres have a golden chance to, at the very least, tie the game. At 16:31, Vincent Trocheck slashes Bowen Byram. And then about halfway through the power play, Vlad Gavrikov cross-checks Jason Zucker. So you have a 5-on-3 for Buffalo, and really, they didn't get much of anything going on that 5-on-3. And then once that was over, the 5-on-4, next to nothing. So the Rangers do keep that 3-2 lead and go to the third period up. And really, the start of the third, Rangers didn't have shots on goal to speak for. But I thought that the first few shifts, the first 5 or so minutes of the third, Rangers were looking solid. Buffalo not doing much. However, once Buffalo does get going, they score. At 5:51, Alex Tuch scores his 31st goal of the season, assisted by Krebs and Thompson. And this was one where it was against the Ranger fourth line, where Hamelas was unable to gain control of the puck, and then Buffalo quickly takes over. And it's a simple shot by Krebs, and Tuch beats Gavrikov. Tuch is able to get his stick free, and it just deflects off of Tuch past Shesterkin to tie it up at 3. So to me, this was kind of going against the flow of play, and it ties it up. Then, about a minute and a half later, Sabres take the lead and keep it. Jason Zucker scores his 24th goal of the season, assisted by McLeod at 7:14. And this was one again where I feel like Gabe Perreault loses his man in Jason Zucker, and then it leads to chaos in front. So Zucker is able to gain control in front. Again, a nice pass by McLeod as he sees that Zucker's wide open, makes a move around Igor, and then Robertson and Borgen were both unable to get a stick on it to prevent it from going in. Sabres take a 4-3 lead there, and just not a whole lot of stoppages in the third period. Where there was a couple of penalties. At the 10-minute mark, Will Borgen holds the stick of Beck Malenstein, and then 45 seconds into that Sabre power play, Sabres take a penalty. Josh Norris hooks Ty Cartier. So, 4-on-4 for a little bit, very brief range of power play, go back to even strength. And yeah, just not a whole lot of stoppages, kind of continuous action. Rangers, I mean, look, them getting outshot 8-1 in the third, definitely it's a bit misleading. It wasn't quite like that, but the Rangers didn't get a whole lot going, and they didn't get a shot on goal until probably about maybe less than 2 minutes left in the third, where I believe it was a JT Miller shot. Right as the Rangers were pulling, as Shesterkin was being pulled. And again, to me, what's fitting in terms of it ending this way, because so many times early in the season, sometimes the Rangers deserve to lose. Sometimes they, were a bit maybe unlucky, and whatever the case may be, so many times they would allow an empty net goal to seal the deal. And that happens here in the last game at Madison Square Garden, where Zach Benson scores his second goal of the game, 12th of the season from Doan Norris at 18:45. And this was one where they cleared out and just Fox is unable to get back there. Doan beats him to the puck, finds Benson open, and he puts it in the empty net. And the Sabres win by a final score of 5-3. Big win for Buffalo, as currently they are alone in first place in the Atlantic Division. But of course, the Lightning and the Canadiens have a game in hand on them. So remains to be seen what happens there. And I'm hoping that, when that last game for the Rangers have against the Lightning, with Buffalo playing that night, which is a good thing, not Montreal, but Buffalo, that the Lightning will have the division on the line at the very least, right? Maybe the conference, but Carolina might take that. But I would, as someone who wants the Rangers to lose, it'd be very, very advantageous for Tampa to, be battling it out for the division on that Wednesday, the 15th. As far as the next game goes, it's the Rangers heading to Dallas. And so now the Rangers will go on the road for the rest of the season, go from Dallas to Florida to Tampa. And in the case of the Dallas game, it'll mean something for Dallas for sure. But Dallas will have a huge game before that. A couple nights before, they will be hosting the Minnesota Wild. And that's kind of the battle in the Central Division for that number 2 seed to see who can get home ice in that matchup. It's already a guarantee. It's the first playoff matchup we know, Minnesota versus Dallas. What if you're looking, again, Dallas will try regardless, but where things will get really tight is if Minnesota beats Dallas in that game. Then it either becomes a tie in points, or if Minnesota were to win that in overtime, it'd be Minnesota back by 1, whereas if Dallas wins regulation, let's say, they'd be up by 4 points with 3 games to go and the tiebreaker. So not that, they still wouldn't have clinched that point, but they'd be very much in the driver's seat. So I think would be better if Minnesota can beat Dallas, and, would certainly drive up the level of desperation for the Stars in that one. But look, this is a good Dallas team that hasn't played all that well lately. Look, you can say the same thing about Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo was coming off a big win, but they weren't playing that well. So maybe just the name of the game, like I said before, is taking aside, sort of the meaning. If these good teams have a requisite lineup that's mostly healthy, the Rangers are going to have some struggles, and going to Dallas won't be easy. Rangers, for what it's worth, early in the year did win an overtime game home against Dallas, but again, can't really take a lot out of that, as that was earlier in the season. So again, Rangers conclude their Madison Square Garden stretch. It was a 7-game homestand and was very successful, 5-2, but they do lose the last one to the Buffalo Sabres by a final score of 5-3. And their final 3 games will be on the road starting Saturday against the Dallas Stars.